she wins. People bear witness. Thank you for letting us be ourselves.
I'm Chuck D, along with my wife, Dr. Gaye Theresa Johnson. And this is the house I grew up in, but now it's been transformed many times over. It's like a sound compound, studios, and posters of musicians on the wall, such as Bob Marley. He set the precedent. You name Bob Marley, just the meaning in music and being able to make reggae just a strong message to the people, and him being impressed by Curtis Mayfield and impressions amongst other musicians in soul and rock and roll as well.
How old were you when this became meaningful to you?
Bob Marley, around 11, 12 years old, when he becomes a mainstream artist. I shot the sheriff, but I didn't shoot the deputy. That was before Clapton.
I think nobody brought colonialism to the people like Bob Marley did. There's an incredible line that he has in a book, in a song called "Wake Up and Live," and he talks about "Rise, you mighty people, from your sleepless slumber." I think that he understood and tried to bring to the people this notion that we've all been asleep and we still are, but that this sleep is sleepless in many ways because many of us are nagged by the feeling of being colonized, whether it's physically or psychologically.
What's this on the wall, stolen from Africa?
This is actually the oldest hanging poster in this room, but you're only talking about like maybe 10 years old, but it says it all. The African Holocaust, stolen from Africa, 100 million people. It's great to be black on the high points, as in the post-Obama days, but when you really want to think about being black, being black was no benefit at this particular time to talk about what is still owed, just because we were judged by the color of our skin.
What is most important for people to understand is that payback is not something that is about just some event that happened, some historical event like slavery. I mean, we're talking about people who are still living off of the legacy of white entitlement and empowerment. And so what we're talking about now is not, I think, what media tries to cast as, monetary reparations or some kind of guilt trip on white society, but instead, understanding that people still live at a disadvantage and that needs to be corrected. So it absolutely has everything to do with Chuck's music.
Does the new political climate with Obama as president do anything towards that end?
I think symbolically it does some things towards that end, but I think that unfortunately folks allow symbolism to substitute for material realities that need to be introduced for people to feel equal in society and not just have the appearance of equality.
Artist by the name of Paul Stone put together a poster. He's a fantastic caricature portrait artist, and kind of got yours truly in one of the hip hop greats. This is Mix Magazine, the artwork, reminiscent of Summer of Love, Hate Asbury, that whole. This is touring in Newcastle, UK. The interesting significance of this is that Newcastle has that same bridge as the bridge in Sydney, and also the railroad bridge over here in New York that actually ties Queens to Manhattan.
You grew up in a little house in Roosevelt, Long Island, and you became a world star with very political poetry.
We learned from the best. I mean, back when I was growing up, there was really no allegiance to just one type of music and one type of radio station. At that particular time, coming up out of the 60s, you had a lot of people that had something to say with their music. They had great skill and a great way, a great penchant for putting words together.
Consciousness is not something we can leave at the door. I mean, the love part of the 60s and the 70s is very important, but there was also a love for the people who have been through brutality and struggle, and that's a part of the love. To love your people is to also express the hate that they have endured and to be real and true to the kinds of politics and realities that they continue to endure, and yet despite all of that, also continue to express, these very humanistic qualities of the black community.
How much does your dialogue, I mean, you guys are talking all the time with each other, how much does your dialogue with Gaye affect your work?
Oh, my dialogue with Dr. Gaye Theresa Johnson affects my work every day now. since we've been together. So I'm getting ready to go into my 20th year of lecturing at colleges, but I have to kind of ask her, like, are things right? What do we see today? What do we see today that's different from 3 years ago? And what do we kind of like see that will kind of like set precedent 3 years from now? So she's the total 3/4 of my whole brain mindset, which is a great thing right now, because a couple years ago I was like, reaching a point of saying, okay, I need to sharpen my point of view, and I could be getting burnt out. But it's kind of cool being burnt out when you're a lecturer, because you could always dip back into the music. Gaye and I really found ourselves, and it was a good thing.
Louis Armstrong is somebody who I think a lot of people misunderstand, because so much of what was presented to the world about Louis Armstrong was in caricatures of black people and black life. But meanwhile, Louis Armstrong was always quietly making an incredible impact. And there's this great story about how 2 weeks after the Little Rock, Arkansas incident in 1957, Louis Armstrong was on a stopover on a tour of his in Grand Forks, North Dakota. And as usual, this was not some kind of random, or this is not some kind of a random choice or an anomaly. As usual, he's quietly making history. He was the first person to stay in the hotel, the first black person to stay in the hotel that he was staying in, and quite purposefully. Grand Forks, North Dakota, known to Louis Armstrong as well, but not advertised until he was asked by a journalist, was also the home to the judge who had desegregated Little Rock, Arkansas school, contrary to Orville Faubus's desires. And so Louis Armstrong was interviewed by a journalist exactly 2 weeks after the Little Rock, Arkansas incident in Grand Forks, and had a lot of things to say about Eisenhower, about whether or not he was going to go to Israel to perform as part of a goodwill mission, to sort of advertise the kind of goodwill Cold War moment between the United States, the Middle East, and Russia. And he was so critical that when this article came out, there were many radio stations that promptly threw away all of his albums. But this was something that was normal for him.
What exactly did he say about that?
Well, he had agreed to do the trip, and it wasn't just Armstrong, but there were a lot of black jazz musicians who traveled to Israel and as part of State Department tours. But he had agreed to make the trip and hadn't made it yet. And he said at that point that he had rethought it, because he said, and a lot of it was, as the journalist later put, expletives that he expressed with regard to Eisenhower, saying that this country is full of shit, and they have no regard for us. And he said, when I see what they're doing to my people in the South, I don't want to go anywhere and say anything good about the United States to anyone. And the next day, when the journalist came back with a copy because by the time he got back to the press room, it was too late to release the story. So the next morning he came back and he showed the article to Louis Armstrong, and Armstrong wrote "solid" at the bottom of the article and signed it and said, "This is exactly what I said, publish it this way."
And also musically speaking, his phrasing is the way we still sing music today, or rap it. His phrasing, when you phrase singing lyrics, rapping is derived from singing phrasing. And as far as his solos, that shaped music as well from the musical standpoint. So his lyrics and his music just is the foundation of the music today.